While the media focuses on shootings that fit their narrative, white Republican shoots a bunch of Mexicans in El Paso, there are a number of stories involving shootings that they don't want to talk about. Like, how about the shooting that didn't happen because of the Second Amendment? Or how about the mass shootings in Chicago that they don't cover? And why don't they cover it? They don't cover it because they do not fit a narrative. And that is exactly why you watch us here, because we give you the stories the mainstream media is too cowardly, too partisan, and too dishonest to cover.
According to new numbers from Chicago police, there were 32 shootings across the city over the weekend. As you mentioned, 59 people shot, among those 7 dead.
No, you don't hear about those unless you tune in to the local news and are a resident in Chicago, because the media is too busy trying to say white people are a plague on this country. White people are the ones who are responsible for all the gun violence. Trump supporters are the ones who are responsible in going out shooting people. Of course, it's nonsense. But they say it, and they say that's why we need to ban your guns. No, they don't like to talk about the man in Springfield, Missouri, who prevented a mass shooting by exercising his Second Amendment rights.
A white man in his 20s pulled into this Walmart and put on tactical gear, including a bulletproof vest, and armed himself with multiple weapons, including an assault-style rifle. Police say he had around 100 rounds of ammo on him. He then walked into the store and started filming the chaos and panic on his phone. Walmart employees started evacuating the store when they saw him walk in. He walked through the entire store and eventually walked out of a fire escape. And when he did, there was an off-duty firefighter waiting for him with a gun of his own and held him at gunpoint. And about that time, Springfield police showed up and arrested the man.
Yes, of course, it's the local news that runs the packages on that. The cable news networks, they mention it. They mention it in passing a couple times, sprinkle it here, sprinkle it there. But they mostly just want to talk about the El Paso shooter. In fact, they don't even like talking about the Dayton shooter, because the El Paso shooter was motivated. Remember, he was motivated by his hatred for Mexicans. And he was inspired, they say, by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump wants to secure the border, and therefore somehow in our wonky world, the two must be inextricably linked, right? They turn a blind eye to the fact that the other shooter, the shooter in Dayton, Ohio, had a history of supporting Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Antifa. No, that's not relevant. None of that helps us make our case. The only thing that's relevant is our narrative, and that's what we're going to shove down your throat. That's why you don't hear about any of the mass shootings that happened in Chicago over the weekend, and there were many. You don't hear him talk about the 59 people who were shot. You don't hear him talk about the 7 people who were killed in Chicago. You had a guy driving around in Chicago, 10 p.m., a car pulled up and shot both him and his 20-year-old pregnant girlfriend. He was pronounced dead at the scene. That was just one of the multiple that took place in that city over the weekend, including 2 mass shootings that happened in one police district. And in another instance, there was a drive-by where 7 people were wounded, and another incident where 8 people were injured and another person died. They're calling it Chicago's most violent weekend. And indeed, it was the most violent weekend of the year in Chicago. According to data from the Chicago Tribune reported on by the Federalist, more than 1,600 people have been shot this year in Chicago, along with 300 homicides. But you don't know about this. You don't know about this unless you follow a niche group of conservatives, a niche group of outlets on Twitter, or you watch the local news in Chicago. You also probably didn't hear about the mass shooting in Detroit on Tuesday. The Metro Times has this story. In Detroit, 4 young men were shot at a beauty salon on Detroit's West Side Tuesday evening. Where was the press conference? Where was CNN's coverage? Where was the national outrage on this? It doesn't exist. Baltimore, they can barely make it through a week without a shooting. In Baltimore, there are multiple shootings a day. In 2018, from February 12th to February 19th, there was no shooting. And you want to know what? That was a miracle. The fact that there wasn't one was newsworthy because it was the longest span of time that there hadn't been a shooting in Baltimore since 2012. And we've said before on this program that the solution to the gun epidemic ultimately will not come in the form of gun-grabbing legislation. In fact, it probably won't even come from Washington.